My son commandeered my lakeside cabin and handed it over to his wife's relatives, declaring, "It's all theirs now. You have no right to set foot here anymore." I forced a smile and nodded, concealing the rage boiling inside me. But as they arrived to settle in, I had orchestrated a shock they could never erase from their minds. They stood frozen in disbelief at the sight before them. What began as deep betrayal evolved into calculated retribution, with fairness delivering its blow from the most unforeseen angle, altering our lives irrevocably. Before diving deeper into the tale, kindly hit that subscribe button on the channel and drop a comment sharing where you're tuning in from. I'd love to hear from you all. I slammed the car door shut with a resounding thud and hoisted my overnight duffel, my mind already drifting to the serene moments awaiting me by the water's edge. 4 full days of solitude at my cabin, precisely the respite I craved after yet another grueling week overseeing the Portland real estate portfolios. The 3 hour trek from the urban sprawl had proven worthwhile, if only for that first glimpse of Lake Michigan's pristine, shimmering expanse once more. Yet an uneasy feeling crept in. Something was amiss. A pair of figures clad in plush white robes occupied my secluded deck, their coffee cups sending wisps of steam into the crisp air. My son Ryan lounged against the balustrade, his tousled brown hair glinting under the late afternoon rays. Trailing him a woman I knew as his wife, Nora fidgeted awkwardly upon noticing my approach. "What in the world?" I whispered under my breath, my bag tumbling from fingers that had gone abruptly limp. Ryan straightened up, his features contorting into a look I'd never witnessed on him before. Not once, even amid his stormiest adolescent rebellions, had he regarded me with such icy rejection. "Dad, you're not welcome to crash here," he shouted across the distance, his tone slicing through the air like a razor. "Nora and I have a private getaway planned." I blinked rapidly, convinced my ears had deceived me. This was my cabin after all. The title bore my signature acquired through the fortunes I'd amassed, developing much of the downtown skyline in Portland. Catherine and I had meticulously selected every plank, every fitting, every item of decor infusing the space with our shared dreams. But Ryan, "This is my cabin," I began, my words fading as the sheer ridiculousness of needing to assert this undeniable truth washed over me. "Doesn't matter to me," he retorted, placing his mug down with a crisp clatter that echoed sharply. "We arrived ahead of you, and we're staying put." Nora uttered something indistinct that escaped my hearing, but Ryan dismissed her with a casual flick of his hand. Her robe parted slightly at the front, and she tugged it closed with a frustrated yank. "Son, I just endured a 3 hour drive," I pleaded, edging tentatively nearer to the entrance. "All I wanted was a quiet weekend away. Leave us alone and stop interrupting." Ryan's volume escalated to a bellow. "You're nothing but an obstacle regardless." Those words landed like a solid punch to the gut. An obstacle. This was my sanctuary, my haven. The spot where Catherine and I had envisioned spending our twilight years, where I sought solace in echoes of her presence even now. I remained rooted there, regaining my balance, gazing at my sole offspring as he scowled down from the deck of my very own retreat. Nora averted her eyes in every direction but mine, her cheeks burning crimson above the collar of her robe. At 30 years old, Ryan was commanding me away from my own land as if I were an unwelcome intruder. The boy who'd once scrambled onto my knee for evening tales, who'd addressed me as daddy, right up until he hit 17, who'd wept in my embrace at his mother's burial. Catherine's soft timbre echoed faintly in my recollection. "Have patience with him, George. He's navigating the sorrow still. Grant him space." 4 years. I'd extended 4 years of forbearance, empathy, and contorting myself to suit his whims and exigencies. And look where it had led. "All right." I found myself uttering the syllable bitter as cinders on my tongue. "All right, I'll head out." I stooped to retrieve my bag, my joints protesting with audible pops. 65 years of age, and my own son was discarding me like mud caked on his boots. "Smart choice," Ryan hollered. "Call ahead next time. Call ahead to access my own domain." I retraced my steps to the vehicle on legs that wobbled like jelly, each stride evoking a withdrawal from a conflict zone I'd been oblivious to entering. In my wake, Ryan's tone softened as he conversed with Nora about their evening meal intentions, the casual intimacy stinging like salt in a fresh wound. The motor ignited with a seamless rumble. European craftsmanship, dependable as ever, in stark contrast to kin, it seemed. I reversed down the drive, my fingers clamped so fiercely on the wheel that my joints blanched. Through the rear view, I glimpsed Ryan and Nora resuming their seats on the deck, swiftly erasing me from their thoughts. My son lifted his coffee cup in a gesture that could pass for a salute or perhaps a definitive farewell. The route back to Portland unfurled before me desolate and interminable. I'd return in capitulation, skulking like a beaten dog, precisely as Catherine had always fretted I might, mirroring my habitual pattern. Come Monday night, I found myself ensconced in my den, sipping tepid coffee alongside the scraps of a lone supper. 4 days had dragged on interminably since that Friday debacle at the cabin. On Saturday, I flinched at every chime of the phone, anticipating Ryan's outreach with some rationale. By Sunday, a disquieting epiphany dawned. Perhaps I'd always capitulated far too readily. The telephone's piercing trill pierced my reverie. Dad. Ryan's inflection lacked any trace of the affection I'd yearned for. Stark transactional. Pay attention. Nora and I have made our decision. The cabin is now for her folks. My coffee vessel halted mid-ascent to my mouth. What Ryan? What on earth do you mean, Edward and Patricia Wilkins? It's their residence from here on. His declaration plummeted like boulders into tranquil depths. You're barred from visiting ever again. The upholstered armchair groaned as I leaned in. Ryan, have you gone mad? You can't simply seize my asset. As a matter of fact, I can and I am. His timbre honed to a keen blade. You scarcely utilize it anyhow, and they're in dire need of stable lodging. 35 years of marathon workdays forging my real estate development firm surged through my consciousness. Each zoning skirmish, each demanding patron, each concession, Catherine and I had endured to secure that idyllic retreat by the shore. It's my cabin. The assertion burst forth with unanticipated vigor. I toiled over 3.5 decades to acquire that haven. Ryan's chuckle was devoid of mirth. You're acting utterly self-centered. After all we've supported you through since Mom's passing, a fracture occurred within me. All you've supported me. My volume matched his escalation. I funded your nuptials, your vehicle, your student debts, that upscale condo down payment. That's standard paternal duty, he interjected. Moreover, you're aging and isolated now. What purpose does such an expansive cabin serve you? Aging and isolated. The barb struck with corporeal force, yet rather than collapsing, I sensed an inner resolve solidify. Catherine's tender counsel resurfaced from recollection regarding forbearance, but Catherine had never witnessed her son utter such deliberate venom. Those are Nora's parents, Ryan. Utter outsiders to me. They're kin now, and contrary to you, they'll truly value the gift. My hold on the receiver constricted until my knuckles paled. No. The quiet lingered between us. I could almost detect his astonishment sizzling across the line. What did you just utter? I said, no, Ryan. The response is no. You don't get to deny me. That cabin is squandered on you regardless. His poise at last splintered, unveiling something repugnant beneath. Nora's parents are facing monetary hardships, and you're merely stockpiling real estate you seldom frequent. The paradox scorched. I'd frequented it more often since Catherine's demise, drawing consolation from the locale of our greatest joys. Ryan was well aware of this. They can seek their own shelter remedies, I stated, taken aback by the firmness in my delivery. I can't fathom how egocentric you've turned. Ryan's pitch veered toward frenzy. Mom would be mortified by you. That overstepped all bounds. Catherine would have abhorred this pilfering, this exploitation of a mourning spouse's devotion to his lone progeny. Your mother would be appalled at what you've devolved into, I murmured softly. Ryan's sharp inhalation resounded. How dare you speak like that? I terminated the call. For the initial occasion in 4 years, I disconnected on my son. The device rested inert in my lap while my pulse thundered against my chest. Beyond the window, Portland's nocturnal commute droned its accustomed melody. Yet within my den, the landscape had irrevocably shifted. The phone trilled anew without delay. Ryan's identifier illuminated the screen. I powered it down. Slumber evaded me that evening. I lingered in my upholstered seat well beyond midnight, dissecting each syllable of Ryan's preposterous ultimatum. The hush in my den now carried a novel quality, not tranquil, but brimming with latent potential like the calm preceding a tempest. Come dawn, a profound alteration had taken root within me. Tuesday ushered in lucidity alongside the rising sun, its golden hues filtering through the curtains and casting long shadows across the room. I brewed coffee, the aroma filling the air with a comforting familiarity, then powered up my laptop to delve into property legislation with the systematic rigor that had erected my real estate dominion. Oregon codes, conveyance stipulations, archival necessities, knowledge absorbed eons past yet never foreseen for deployment against my own flesh and blood. The device vibrated with incoming texts all day. Ryan, naturally. Dad, let's discuss yesterday's exchange, followed by cease this obstinacy. Culminating in Nora's parents will view the cabin this weekend. I erased each without a reply. Come Wednesday morn, I navigated to my lawyer's firm in the heart of the city. Samuel Wong had managed my commercial dealings for 18 years, a keen intellect cloaked in polished decorum. His penthouse suite commanded views of the bay expansive panes encasing yachts, bobbing on the waves like graceful dancers. George. Samuel stood from his ebony workstation offering a resolute clasp. Pleasure to see you. What's the matter at hand? I eased into the accustomed guest seat, the hide emitting its perennial squeak in the identical location. I require counsel on safeguarding assets. Samuel arched a brow but upheld his expert impartiality. Business or personal? The Lake Michigan cabin. I hesitated, selecting my phrasing with care. An individual is endeavoring to assert proprietorship entitlements they lack. Kin. The inquiry landed like an unwelcome verdict. Affirmative. Samuel inclined his head deliberately, his countenance adopting greater gravity. That muddies the waters. Familial asset conflicts can escalate rapidly. What avenues do I have? Numerous. Samuel extracted a notepad, his stylus already in motion. Initially, we verify your title papers are unassailable. Next, we can institute supplementary safeguards, fiduciary arrangements, corporate entities, whichever aligns with your circumstances. How expeditiously varies by intricacy. Fundamental paperwork audit several days. More intricate defenses 3 to 4 weeks. I pondered Ryan's message. Nora's parents arriving this weekend. Time might be scarce. Samuel laid aside his stylus, scrutinizing my expression with the acuity that rendered him adept at deciphering patrons and panels alike. George is an individual attempting to oust you from your own domain. The query dangled like a charge. Upon my affirmation, Samuel's vocational facade stiffened into a more intimate resolve. Then we commence forthwith. I'll require duplicates of all titles, conveyance records, any materials tied to the asset's proprietorship lineage. I can deliver all by tomorrow dawn. Excellent. Samuel jotted another memo. And George chronicle everything. Dialogues, intimidations, coercion efforts. Timely notations are pivotal in such scenarios. Intimidations. Coercion. Those juridical phrases for what my son had attempted against me. The lift plummeted toward the subterranean garage, each level signifying my separation from the existence I'd known mere days prior. At ground level, my likeness reflected in the gleaming metal panels. A gentleman appearing wearier than his 65 years yet, harboring a fresh spark in his gaze. Resolve. My phone chimed as I arrived at the vehicle. Ryan once more. This instance I engaged. At last. His inflection bore the honed bite of one habituated to prevailing. We must settle this juvenile farce. The sole farce, I responded serenely, is your conviction that you can pilfer my asset. Pilfer. How dare you level that accusation at me? What term fits appropriating another's abode sans consent? Ryan's intermission extended beyond typical. When he resumed, his cadence had morphed to a more scheming lilt. Dad, Nora's parents are truly grappling with fiscal woes. Patricia was let go last week, and Edward's retirement stipend scarcely meets their lease. A ploy I recalled from his youthful days. Resort to pity when mandates faltered. Regrettable, but that confers no entitlement to my cabin. You might exhibit magnanimity, display some familial camaraderie, akin to the camaraderie you exhibited Friday at the cabin. Another lull. That was, we were caught off guard by your appearance there at my own domain. You ought to have rung ahead. The looped reasoning dizzied me. Ryan, I'm not relinquishing the cabin to anyone. End of discussion. Very well. His timbre snapped like a lash. But Nora's parents are proceeding to inspect it this Saturday. They've secured transit already. The connection's severed. I lingered beside my automobile receiver, still to my ear, absorbing the monotone beep. Overhead, Portland's midday heavens extended boundless and azure. The identical firmament that had overseen my erection of all I possessed via decades of diligent labor, its vastness now a silent witness to my burgeoning defiance. Saturday loomed merely 4 days hence. The monotone persisted its robotic drone as I remained immobilized in my upholstered seat receiver clamped to my ear. Ryan's declaration reverberated in the abrupt quietude. Nora's parents are still arriving to view it this Saturday. View it as though my cabin were already in their grasp. Deliberately, I descended the phone and positioned it on the adjacent stand beside my neglected coffee vessel. The brew had chilled ages ago, a delicate scrim forming atop its somber depths, mirroring the film of resentment settling over my thoughts. Beyond Portland's twilight rush supplied its habitual accompaniment. Yet within my den, the ambiance had transformed, utterly charged with an undercurrent of impending reckoning. How far back had this pattern extended? At what precise juncture had I ceased being Ryan's parent and morphed into his fiscal reservoir? The recollections inundated me with excruciating vividness, each one sharpened by hindsight's cruel lens. Ryan's matrimony 3 years prior, he'd phrased it as requiring aid with costs. Yet I'd issued a draft for $23,000 sans soliciting a fiscal outline. The nonchalant manner in which he'd received it, as if I were a dispenser yielding anticipated funds, rather than his father enacting a substantial forfeiture, the memory now chafed like an open sore. Then Nora's vehicular woes 6 months thereafter. Dad, we desperately require dependable conveyance. Ryan had intoned, his inflection bearing that distinct nuance I'd come to associate with imminent petitions. $30,000 for a pristine crossover procured and presented within days. Nora had grasped my hand with fervor, but Ryan had scarcely glanced from his device upon receiving the fob. Catherine's murmur resurfaced from reminiscence. Exercise patience with him, George. He's contending with my absence yet. But Catherine had departed 4 years since, and Ryan's contending had transmuted into a distinct entity, one that bore the hallmarks of deliberate leveraging of a bereaved father's frantic urge to sustain bonds with his singular heir. I rose from my seat, limbs rigid from prolonged immobility, the creak of the floorboards underfoot echoing my internal stiffness. My dien's partitions showcased eras of vocational triumphs, accolade snapshots alongside associates, encased packs from pivotal development ventures testimony to an individual who'd forged a realm via astute bargaining and tactical foresight, the plaques gleaming faintly in the lamplight. So why had I devolved into such a milquetoast in my private sphere? The resolution resided in a gilded frame upon my workstation. Catherine's portrait captured on our final sojourn to the cabin. She beamed at a quip I'd uttered, her silvered tresses capturing the Lake Michigan radiance, her eyes alive with the joy we'd shared in that sacred space. Over the 4 years post her demise, I'd acquiesced to each of Ryan's entreaties, petrified that refusal could alienate the final kin I possessed, the fear a constant shadow in my solitude. Yet kin didn't plunder one another. Kin didn't exploit mourning for pecuniary gain, twisting vulnerability into vulnerability. Ryan's postgraduate schooling outlays had amassed close to $50,000 across 3 years. I'd settled every invoice sans inquiry, even as he'd altered disciplines thrice and prolonged his curriculum. His expressions of appreciation had dwindled in duration and regularity, ultimately vanishing, save when another necessity arose, the pattern now glaring in its transactional coldness. Discernment of motifs and aptitude that had bolstered me in development tender skirmishes and pact discussions. Employ the identical dissecting lens to Ryan's conduct, and the motif emerged starkly evident like blueprints revealing structural flaws. Each solicitation had escalated in magnitude. Each token of thanks had diminished. Each exchange had veered more toward commerce, less toward affection. I'd believed myself an exemplary parent. In truth, I'd conditioned him to perceive me as a commodity, not a person, the realization settling heavy as concrete. The mural timepiece told 800s its peal piercing in the hushed chamber. Nora's parents would descend upon my cabin in 4 days, poised to assert dominion over an estate I'd labored 35 years to attain. They'd likely toted measuring ribbons and decor periodicals, already envisioning how to reconfigure my life's labor to accommodate their ease, the presumption fueling my resolve. Catherine's guidance on forbearance had rung true when Ryan was authentically mourning. But mourning didn't persist 4 years unabated. Mourning didn't conspire to filch assets from the benefactor who'd proffered boundless fiscal aid. Mourning didn't disconnect on a father post demanding he yield his abode to aliens. This transcended mourning now. This was avarice, pure and unadorned. I cradled Catherine's portrait, examining her well-known grin, the lines around her eyes speaking of shared laughter and trials weathered together. She'd cherished Ryan profoundly, yet she'd served as the enforcer in our domicile. Catherine would have rebuffed this magnitude of insolence, this flippant disregard for my entitlements and sentiments, her spirit a guiding force in my awakening. "What course would you counsel?" I queried her likeness softly, the words hanging in the still air. The retort materialized promptly in my own timbre, not hers. Cease victimhood. Rest eluded me entirely. I'd adhered to my customary pre-slumber regimen: cleanse, oral hygiene, the athletic segment from Sunday's periodical, the pages rustling softly in the dim light. Yet, upon my cranium meeting the cushion at 11, my intellect rebuffed quiescence. Rather than ovines, I tallied calendar marks. Monday, June 15th. Tuesday the 16th. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, June 22nd. 7 days by the witching hour, I'd forsaken any facade of repose. Reclined supine palms interlaced behind my nape, I fixated on the overhead and permitted my cognition to tackle the quandary akin to former development accords. Deconstruct the elements. Pinpoint the vital trajectory. Quantify assets and chronology, the methodical approach a balm to my churning thoughts. Ryan had committed a pivotal strategic blunder. He'd disclosed a precise terminus. Across 35 years of oversight, I'd gleaned that the patron who unveils their chronology foremost typically forfeits the parley. Sunday, June 22nd, implied he operated retrograde from a rigid limitation. Likely Nora's parents' relocation itinerary or tenancy termination. The numeric chronometer radiated 12:47 a.m. as the resolution scaffold commenced coalescing. This transcended sentiment now. This pertained to stratagem, and stratagem was terrain I navigated expertly, the familiarity grounding me. Each recalcitrant patron, each unattainable cutoff, each subcontractor endeavoring to extort surplus funds. They'd all imparted priceless insights on mortal disposition and leverage Fulcrum's lessons now resurfacing with crystal clarity. Tenet 1 never barter from despondency. Ryan presumed I was frantic to safeguard our bond valid for 4 years, but frantic individuals don't sever calls on their progeny. Frantic individuals don't enlist counsel. Tenet 2, informational superiority, secures accords. Ryan believed he comprehended my entirety, the lamenting widower, incapable of rebuffing his son's pleas. He lacked awareness of my dialogue with Samuel Wong. No inkling of the archival scrutiny already in progress. Tenet 3 chronology dictates all. 7 days appeared hasty from his vantage, affording scant margin for fallback scheming. From mine, 7 days sufficed amply to devise something refined the extension, allowing for meticulous planning. I recollected Victor Hale the builder, who'd sought to elbow me from the waterfront zone venture in '95. Hale had deployed bullying maneuvers, menacing litigation, disseminating whispers regarding my firm's dependability. Ring a bell, I'd permitted him to deem his ploys efficacious, while discreetly locking pacts with 4 of his primary affiliates. When his venture chronology imploded, I'd stood prepared with remedies at elevated tariffs. The analogy was nigh impeccable. Ryan fancied he was compelling me to yield. Instead, he was granting me interval to construct the impeccable snare, the irony savory. My device hummed with an inbound missive. Ryan, inevitably. Dad. Nora's parents secured a relocation service for Sunday. Kindly refrain from complicating this unduly. The arrogance was staggering. He'd prearranged transporters for my domain. The brazen effrontery genuinely astounded me from a commercial lens. Perpetually behave as if the pact is sealed even amid deception. Yet I'd encountered this gambit previously. Carla Esposito had essayed the identical ploy in 2005, materializing at my bureau with schematic blueprints for alterations to an estate she hadn't yet possessed. Carla had absorbed a costly tutorial on the disparity betwixt assurance and proprietorship entitlements. Ryan was poised to absorb likewise. I purged his missive and deposited the device. My intellect was whirring through prospects now. The identical systematic methodology I'd harnessed to metamorphose a modest brokerage into a multi-million enterprise. Assets, chronology, aspired resolution, tolerable hazards, each facet dissected with precision. Assets, considerable monetary reserves, juridical advocacy. 35 years of vocational alliances and one vital edge. Ryan ignored my adjacent Alex's technological prowess. Alex was indebted from last autumn when I'd assisted with a structural flaw in his attic. Chronology. 7 days to enact Sunday culmination. Aspired resolution, utter inversion of Ryan's dominant stance. Not merely halting his larceny, but guaranteeing he grasped the repercussions of deeming me prey, the outcome layered with poetic justice. The chronometer displayed 1:23 a.m. when I at last grinned amid the obscurity, the expression foreign, yet empowering. Catherine used to remark I possessed a merciless vein that surfaced when pressed excessively. She'd observed it with rivals who endeavored to underbid via dubious methods with vendors who'd striven to violate stipulations. You're excessively amiable 95% of the occasion, she'd confided once. But that remaining 5% is utterly formidable. Ryan had never encountered that 5%. He was on the cusp of a tutorial. By 2:30 in the morn, the foundational schema was robust. Tomorrow, I'd solicit Alex on the tech facets, his expertise a key pillar. Thursday, I'd conclude particulars with Samuel. Friday and Saturday for groundwork and emplacement. Saturday Eve. I'd journey to Lake Michigan, one ultimate occasion, as the compliant parent Ryan anticipated. Sunday dawn would unveil a markedly altered George Reynolds to the cabin one he'd never confronted. Tuesday dawn delivered the sharpness that solely resolute deed can bestow the early light, infusing the room with renewed purpose. I roused at 6:30, invigorated beyond recent recollection. Cleansed, prepared coffee. The steam curling like hopeful omens, and strolled to Alex's abode precisely at 8:45. My neighbor greeted at the threshold in his standard remote work garb, worn denim and a tech firm tee from the Bay Area. Behind his rimless spectacles, his gaze bore the mildly distant aura of one immersed in algorithms for hours. George all well. Alex sidestepped, ushering me into his workspace, where 4 screens exhibited code streams. Truthfully, I require assistance with an inventive tech endeavor. I positioned myself in the seat adjacent his station, observing the formidable assortment of devices and wiring blanketing every plane. Alex's brows elevated with prompt curiosity. What manner of endeavor you've captured my interest fully? Domestic mechanization. Involving motion detectors, vocal aids, perhaps illumination displays? I halted, gauging his response, the air thick with anticipation. A jolt for certain uninvited callers. This intrigues profoundly. Alex pivoted his seat to confront me squarely, resembling a spectral abode configuration. Intelligent domicile fusion with dramatic components. Near enough. Precisely. The sort that would etch a lasting mark. Alex's beam was contagious. George, this evokes a thriller flick. When do we initiate 3 hours? Hence, we were stowing Alex's crossover with sufficient apparatus to equip a modest lab movement. Trackers adjustable, LED ribbons, cordless audio units, concealed lenses, fluid regulators, and a slate brimming with domicile mechanization code. The voyage to Lake Michigan elapsed swiftly as Alex delineated the potentials, his enthusiasm palpable in every gesture. We can script sequential reactions. Movement initiates luminescence. Luminescence sparks vocal cues. Vocal cues activate aqueous mechanisms. The entire abode transforms into an engaging spectacle, the possibilities unfolding like a digital tapestry. How intricate can we render it boundless horizons? Envision movement trackers in each chamber. Vocal aids scripted with bespoke alerts. Illumination adapting to locomotion motifs. Alex was virtually leaping in his position. We might incorporate visage detection should you desire to pinpoint particular callers. Compelling. Commence with fundamentals and assess our window. We attained the cabin mid-noon. Alex emitted an admiring whistle upon entering the lane. Stunning locale, George. Your enigmatic callers are in for a memorable reception. The setup procedure unveiled Alex's authentic mastery. In moments, he'd charted tracker locales across the cabin, pinpointed prime lens perspectives, and initiated slate coding to orchestrate all. Movement tracker here at the ingress, he elucidated, affixing a unit no bulkier than a haze sensor. The instant one enters, it ignites the parlor lights in this pulsing array, whilst the vocal aid declares you lack ownership of this abode. Depart forthwith. And should they linger, Alex's gaze sparkled. Stage 2. Movement in the parlor activates every spigot and cascade in the dwelling to maximum flow. Moreover, the vocal alerts intensify. We labored consistently through the midday hours, the sun filtering through the windows in dappled patterns that belied our intense focus. Alex threaded wiring along skirting-coded reaction chains and validated each element with the exactitude of one who relished tech conundrums deeply. I aided as feasible, awestruck by the complexity of our creation, the wires humming with potential energy. The elegance of this array, Alex remarked, tweaking a concealed lens aft. A shelf resides in its legality. Movement-initiated illumination, vocal support, mechanized aqueous arrays. All conventional intelligent domicile traits merely ingeniously scripted. By force Suru, each space housed at minimum dual movement trackers, linked to illumination spectacles that would pulse and blaze in motifs Alex labeled profoundly disquieting, the effects evoking a sense of impending doom. The vocal aid had been coded with progressively forceful communiques activated by sustained movement sensing. Aqueous arrays throughout the dwelling would engage sporadically post-preliminary activation. Let's validate. Alex proposed slate and grasp. Traverse into the parlor. I advanced via the ingress. Instantaneously, lights commenced blazing in a bewildering motif, whilst the vocal aid intoned, "This domain pertains to George Reynolds. You infringe. Depart immediately." Alex materialized beside beaming widely, persists circulating. Post 45 seconds of ongoing motion, every luminescence in the dwelling initiated pulsing, whilst the vocal shifted to, "Alert safeguard array engaged. Officials alerted. Evacuate promptly." The clamor of surging liquid resounded from the galley and lavatories as spigots activated autonomously. Splendid, I articulated, truly astounded, utterly splendid. Alex deactivated the validation chain, appearing immensely gratified. The array possesses reserve power, thus they can't merely toggle the primary interrupter, and all is governed distantly via your device. You can oversee the lenses, modify configurations, even initiate manual supersedes. As we stowed our implements, Alex's inquisitiveness ultimately prevailed. So when precisely do these enigmatic callers materialize Sunday dawn and they're genuinely unprepared, I contemplated Ryan's missive coordinating transporters for my domain. Suffice to say, they're intending to nestle quite snugly in my abode. Alex's chortle reverberated across the vacant cabin. Well, they're assuredly receiving a fervent reception. Thursday morning saw Alex at my threshold by 8:15, laden with gear unseen prior. His gaze twinkled with the zeal of one who devoted the eve to envisioning augmentations to an already formidable array. Ideas struck me, he proclaimed, balancing a petite projector and audio setup. Suppose they attempt to sever the principal energy valid query. One I'd pondered amid my own fitful eve. What do you advocate commercial accumulators concealed in the cellar? Sufficient capacity to sustain all for a fortnight. Alex's beam was infectious. Additionally, I fetched projectors for mural spectacles swaying Umbra's shifting forms. This will be mythic. The trek to Lake Michigan transpired briskly as Alex sketched his amplifications, his voice animated with creative fire. Movement-initiated casts of spectral outlines audio arrays that would murmur from secreted units across the abode reserve energy provisions that would render the cabin practically impervious to deactivation. Your enigmatic callers, Alex commented upon entering the cabin's lane, will believe they've entered a spectral cinema. Ideal. We toiled with concentrated fervor through the morn, the lake's gentle lapping providing an ironic backdrop to our labors. Alex fitted projectors in the primary spaces, coding them to hurl shifting umbras over partitions and overheads. The outcome, even in daylight, was authentically perturbing. Obscure shapes that appeared to stride aft furnishings contours that flickered just beyond side view, evoking chills despite the warmth. The splendor of this configuration Alex expounded whilst tuning. A mural fixture lies in mental repercussion. The mortal psyche seeks motifs in haphazard inputs. These casts will induce them to perceive non-existent entities, the subtlety amplifying the dread. Concurrently, I concentrated on the sonic amplification. Alex had procured expert-caliber units scarcely larger than haze sensors, which he sighted across every space. The sonic archive he'd compiled was remarkably eerie footfalls, in vacant corridors, hushed utterances, groaning planks, gusts seeming to infiltrate sealed panes, each sound layered to build unease. The array will overlay these acoustics haphazardly, Alex observed, refining the sonic tiers. At times singular, at times manifold, overlaps sustain their uncertainty of verity. By midday, we'd transfigured the tranquil cabin into an entity befitting a mental suspense narrative, the air now humming with latent tension. The reserve accumulator array, artfully secreted below the chief power board, would guarantee ceaseless function irrespective of efforts to cripple the supply, its hum a subtle assurance. What of a caution placard? I posited during our midday respite, the scent of sandwiches mingling with solder. Something to establish the proper ambiance upon arrival. Alex's gaze ignited. Inspired. Perhaps greetings to the domicile of tomorrow, venture in at personal peril, evokes a tech exhibit. We devoted 90 minutes fashioning the ideal placard expert in appearance affixed conspicuously on the portal. To passers-by, it would imply a lavish, intelligent abode display. To our unbidden guests, it would proffer equitable forewarning of the interior perils, the words a veiled omen. The midday was committed to thorough validation and ultimate tuning. Alex traversed each space whilst I oversaw the command slate, observing as movement trackers initiated chained reactions across every array. Concurrently, the symphony of tech, a testament to our synergy. Movement sensed at ingress, Alex proclaimed. Luminescence engaging cast array, activating sonic chain commencing. The cabin burst into regulated pandemonium. Pulse lights throbbed in bewildering motifs while spectral umbras cavorted over partitions. The vocal aid broadcast its severe caution on infringement, whilst uncanny murmurs appeared to originate from vacant nooks. Liquid commenced coursing from spigots and cascades across the dwelling, the combined assault overwhelming. How prolong this chain? I inquired, sincerely awed by the harmony, whilst water echoed like distant thunder. Incessant amid motion detection with 45-second pauses, should they attempt concealment or immobility. Alex radiated vocational satisfaction. The array presumes any lingering occupant is either sanctioned or obstinate. It adapts thusly. We executed concluding validations in every space, assuring fluid fusion betwixt all elements. The projectors harmonized impeccably with sonic spectacles. Movement trackers enveloped every conceivable route through the abode. The reserve energy arrays stayed concealed yet reachable for upkeep, their presence a silent guardian. As dusk neared, Alex executed concluding tweaks to the handheld interface that would permit me to supervise all from afar. Real-time lens streams, array condition alerts, manual supersede commands. Total directive authority from any locale with network linkage. The app, a digital extension of my will. This is frankly the most advanced domicile mechanization venture I've undertaken. Alex stated, stowing his implements with evident hesitance to part from his opus. Your callers will receive the astonishment of their existences. Positioned at the threshold, I appraised our craftsmanship one ultimate occasion. The cabin appeared precisely as ever tranquil, inviting placid, the facade belying the intricate web beneath. Yet under that acquainted veneer lurked a tech lattice that would counter unbidden intruders with unyielding, ineluctable ferocity, the contrast thrilling. Gratitude, Alex. This is impeccably ideal. Alex's chortle resounded across the vacant cabin as we secured and proceeded to our vehicles. I nearly pity whoever manifests here Sunday. Nearly. Sunday, June 22nd. The date Ryan had designated for his ultimate triumph, the irony now mine to savor. I stationed myself in my den at 1:30 precisely, 4 monitors aglow with lens feeds from the cabin. The serene midday at Lake Michigan appeared misleadingly calm via the high-res lenses Alex had sighted across my domain. Avians flitted amid evergreens. Sunbeams glittered on the aquatic plain. No trace of the tech lattice lurking below the cabin's guileless veneer, the deception perfect. My device rested beside the keys, its display exhibiting the domicile mechanization application governing every array Alex and I had meticulously woven. Movement trackers primed sonic arrays, prepared illumination matrices coded aqueous regulators set, cast arrays charged with their disquieting ballet. All had validated flawlessly amid our Thursday finale. Now arrived the authentic spectacle anticipation thrumming like electricity. At 1:45 p.m., a silver sedan materialized on the access path lens, punctual as Ryan had vowed. My son's timeliness had perpetually been among his steadier attributes. Beneficial in academia, ruinous in scheming, and ideal for vengeance orchestration, the precision a gift. Precisely timed, I muttered, refining the screen tilt for supreme observation. The automobile entered my lane with nonchalant assurance, as if the riders possessed every pebble in the trail. Ryan disembarked from the rider's flank, initially his brown locks snaring the midday glow as he extended surveying what he evidently deemed his clan's domain henceforth. Nora emerged from the operator's position, promptly aiding her parents with their baggage, her movements efficient yet tense. Edward and Patricia Wilkins appeared just as I'd envisioned, pensioner vintage, mildly worn by life, yet advancing with the zealous expectancy of folks who'd just acquired an unanticipated boon, their expressions a mix of greed and relief. Patricia gripped a spacious handbag and what seemed household footwear, primed to domesticate another's domicile. They congregated at the sedan's rear, disembarking valises and cartons with the proficiency of an enduring resettlement. Not a fleeting sojourn, not a provisional setup, a total usurpation of my cabin performed with the effortless surety of individuals convinced their mark was too feeble to contest the sight, fueling my quiet resolve. Ryan gestured toward the primary ingress, conversing vivaciously with his in-laws, his gestures broad and commanding. Even via the lens, his posture exuded victory and dominion, a stark contrast to the vulnerability he'd once shown. Nora concurred with nods, sporadically eyeing the cabin's casements, as if inwardly inventorying which quarters her parents might favor her calculations evident. They neared my portal as a cohesive unit, 4 individuals utterly convinced of their prerogative to appropriate my domain. Patricia advanced marginally ahead, her stance implying one ready to assume domestic oversight, forthwith her eagerness palpable. Then they encountered the caution placard. Alex's expertly affixed board stood boldly beside the ingress. Greetings to the domicile of tomorrow. Venture in at personal peril. The script was distinct, the communiqué unequivocal, the forewarning juridically adequate, a final olive branch ignored. Patricia halted foremost, her visage shadowing as she perused the placard, her timbre transmitting crisply, via the sonic capture Alex had cited, proximate the ingress. What absurdity is this? Who affixed this ludicrous item? Edward aligned with her, peering at the placard with manifest vexation. Likely some jester youth. Disregard it, Pat. Ryan's guffaw was acute and derisive. Oh, that's merely Dad being peculiar. He likely deemed it amusing or such. Fret not in the least. Nora shrugged, already extending for the knob.
The elder's perpetually somewhat odd correct, "Let's merely enter." But Patricia wasn't concluded. Her countenance reddened with outrage as she seized the placard's fixture and wrenched it loose from the barrier with astonishing vigor. The expert setup Alex had invested 90 minutes refining disintegrated in instants, the board rattling to the earth. "There!" Patricia proclaimed, booting the toppled placard aside.
I refuse some foolish caution spoiling our inaugural day in our fresh abode, Ryan commended. Superb. You're spot on, Patricia. This is your domain now. Via my screens, I observed them traverse the ruined caution placard and near my portal. 4 individuals who just exhibited utter disdain for my domain, my communique, and my entitlement to establish limits in my own abode, their actions sealing their fate. Equitable forewarning extended. Equitable forewarning spurned with scorn. Nora inserted the latchkey Ryan had evidently supplied, likely duplicated from the reserve I'd entrusted him ages past, in a moment of familial trust now betrayed. The mechanism rotated fluidly. The portal swung ajar, and my son guided Nora's parents across the lintel of my cabin like a victorious commander annexing terrain. "Settle in utterly," Ryan declared, his timbre resounding through the vestibule. "This locale is yours henceforth." Patricia's elated inhalation was discernible via the audio array. "Oh, it's yet more exquisite indoors, Ryan. I can't fathom how straightforward this proved. Certain folks are simply innate doormats." The movement trackers logged their entry forthwith, crimson signals illuminating across my oversight array. 4 marks within the cabin, arrays primed and reactive. All tech facets poised for initiation the moment ripe. I reclined in my upholstered seat, Digit suspended over the handheld display that would commence their tutelage and reverence for others' domains. Not immediately. Permit them acclimation first, the delay heightening the impact. 9:30 materialized with the exactitude of a precision chronometer. Via the sleeping chamber lens feed, I observed Ryan and Nora nestle into slumber in what they deemed their principal boudoir. The visitor chamber display depicted Edward and Patricia, already insensible, depleted from their day appropriating my domain. Impeccable chronology for their tech arousal. The irony, delicious. My Digit lingered over the primary initiation directive Alex had coded into my handheld. One contact would liberate every array we'd meticulously interwoven across the cabin. Movement trackers primed, sonic chains charged, cast arrays, prepared aqueous regulators set. Time for my son to comprehend the chasm betwixt prey and tactician, the lesson long overdue. I engaged execute. The metamorphosis was immediate and splendid. Every luminescence in the cabin commenced pulsing in synchronized motifs, swift bursts of crimson indigo and ivory that transmuted the serene boudoirs into bewildering rave settings, the chaos disorienting even through the screen. Concurrently, liquid gushed from every spigot, every cascade forging a booming orchestra of cascading fluid across the dwelling, the sound overwhelming. Ryan jolted erect in bed, his outline stark against the tumultuous luminescence. Nora floundered adjacent, both hollering inquiries drowned by the tech onslaught, their panic evident. Then the vocal aide entered the fray. Caution, illicit entry, sensed. The proclamation thundered from concealed units across the cabin. You lack ownership of this abode. Vacate the grounds promptly. Via the visitor chamber lens, I observed Edward and Patricia lurch from their berth in dread. Patricia's shriek was distinctly perceptible via the sonic stream as swaying umbras commenced casting across the partitions. Spectral shapes that appeared to motion and shift with otherworldly intent, the illusions masterful. Edward, act! Patricia's timbre, fractured with alarm. I comprehend naught of this. Edward retorted, his utterances scarcely audible over the surging liquid and pulsing lights. The splendor of Alex's coding manifested as the arrays cascaded in impeccable harmony. Movement trackers sensed their frenzied transit betwixt spaces, initiating supplementary sonic cautions and escalating the optic spectacles. The further they dashed, the more belligerent the abode grew, adapting like a living entity. Ryan materialized in the corridor lens feed. His locks tousled, his assured bearing utterly fractured vulnerability exposed. This defies possibility. Abodes don't behave thus. Nora trailed stumbling, striving to attain what she presumed the chief power board. Where's the circuit panel? We must deactivate this. But Alex's reserve arrays functioned impeccably. Even upon locating the power board, the accumulators would sustain function for weeks, the resilience unbreakable. The cabin had evolved into tech self-sufficient, obedient solely to my distant directives, a fortress of code. Alert safeguard protocols initiated. The vocal aid proclaimed anew, illicit dwellers shall be expelled. Patricia emerged in the parlor lens, her countenance distorted with horror as projector-born umbras cavorted about her. This locale is cursed. We must flee. The portal securing chain engaged as Nora attained the primary egress. Alex had coded a 45-second postponement, insufficient to ensnare but ample to engender suffocating dread. Nora wrenched the grip frantically. The portals won't yield. What variety of array is this? Via my screens, I beheld 4 individuals who'd boldly encroached my domain, now diminished to petrified, bewildered casualties of tech they couldn't fathom or govern the reversal poetic. Ryan, who'd scorned me as frail and yielding, staggered amid pulsing lights, whilst unseen units murmured encircling him. Nora, who'd schemed to resolve her parents' dilemmas with my cabin, couldn't unravel the enigma of an intelligent latch. The cast arrays attained their coded apex, saturating every partition with shifting shapes that appeared to observe and trail their alarmed motions. Merged with the enveloping sonic spectacles, footfalls, groaning gusts seeming to infiltrate sealed panes, the cabin had transmuted into a tech-spectral abode, the atmosphere thick with manufactured terror. Edward slumped into a seat, his visage ashen amid the blazing lights. We require egress immediately. I'm endeavoring, Nora bellowed in return, yet grappling the portal controls, desperation in her voice. Precisely 7 hours post-initiation commencement, the mechanized chain attained its pinnacle. Every array functioned concurrently. Luminescence, liquid sonic casts, and vocal cautions forging a perceptual overload crafted to submerge any logical cognition, the culmination overwhelming. Ryan positioned in the parlor's core, rotating in loops as umbras cavorted about him, and liquid surged from concealed origins. The assured man who'd banished me from my own domain now resembled a misplaced youth in a tech horror. Aurora illumination commenced sifting via the panes as the portal latches ultimately released. Nora wrenched the ingress ajar, and all 4 lurched toward the outlet in utter mental rout, their defeat complete. My device commenced chiming as they attained their sedan. Ryan's identifier materialized on the display. The device trilled at precisely 7:15, severing the serene morn hush of my den. Ryan's identifier gleamed on the display, and I permitted a modest grin ere responding with meticulously gauged solicitude. Ryan Morn, greetings, lad. How fared your eve at the cabin? His riposte shattered the morn's serenity like fracturing crystal. What have you wrought, you deranged warped elder? His timbre crackled with frenzy and weariness. Patricia and Edward are scarred. They're scarcely articulate. I modulated my inflection to convey sincere bewilderment. Ryan, what do you imply? What transpired yonder? Spare me the guileless charade. Each syllable quivered with fury. The abode descended into utter madness. Luminescences blazing everywhere, liquid gushing from every spigot, vocals shrieking for us to depart. Intriguing. Alex's orchestration had surpassed expectations. That evokes sheer horror, I responded, infusing authentic worry into my words. Did you summon aid? We contacted authorities. Ryan's timbre fractured. They arrived at 5:30 this morn, inspected all, discovered naught amiss. They claimed it was likely merely some tech glitch. Superb. The allure of intelligent domicile tech, wholly licit, entirely refutable. Well, that's consoling, I articulated rationally. At minimum, you realize no genuine peril existed. Genuine peril, Ryan's screech was so vehement I had to distance the receiver from my oracle. We slumbered not for 9 hours. Edward faltered thrice. Patricia won't cease weeping. I emitted empathetic tuts. I'm profoundly regretful you endured such a harrowing ordeal. These contemporary electronic arrays can prove highly erratic, their glitches as unpredictable as human folly. Cease the derision. The despondency in his timbre was nearly melodic. This wasn't arbitrary failure, and we're both aware. Ryan, I'm truly fretful for you. You sound profoundly strained, the concern laced with irony. I halted, then appended with impeccably tuned naivete. Perhaps the abode simply dislikes outsiders lodging there, its personality, a whimsical defense. The hush extended for 15 seconds. When Ryan resumed, his timbre had descended to a perilous murmur. I know this was your doing. In some manner you engineered this entire ordeal. Me, I chortled softly. Ryan, I remained here in Portland all eve. How could I conceivably govern arrays at the cabin from 250 miles distant? You're a tech virtuoso now. Is that the case? In truth, Alex was the tech virtuoso, but I discerned no cause to illuminate him on my allied edges. Lad, I can scarcely navigate my media console controller. You're aware of that. Ryan's respiration grew labored as he wrestled with the infeasibilities of substantiating his doubts. The authorities stated all seemed operational normally upon their arrival. There it is. Must have been an energy spike, or akin. An energy spike enduring 9 hours that generated vocals and shifting umbras. I permitted a nuance of tender worry to infuse my timbre. Ryan, are you certain you didn't envision some of these tension can induce mirages? You know mirages. The term erupted from his gullet. 4 individuals experienced identical mirages concurrently. Collective delusion is a recorded mental occurrence often amplified by shared stress. Ryan's choked weep was plainly perceptible via the link. For 4 years, I'd been the one initiating frantic calls, imploring comprehension, garnering curt rebuttals. The balance was profoundly gratifying, a quiet vindication. We're never returning, he asserted, attempting to infuse vigor into his trembling timbre. Never. The cabin is yours. We desire naught with that accursed locale. That's likely prudent, I concurred gently. At times, abodes cultivate dispositions, particularly when sensing their limits, violated the metaphor rich with subtext. You can't evade accountability. Somehow we'll substantiate it was you. Substantiate what precisely? That you endured a poor eve, entailing what authorities deemed a tech glitch. Ryan's hush prolonged sufficiently that I pondered if the link had failed. When he ultimately articulated, his timbre bore the vacant resonance of utter vanquish. I misjudged you. You misjudged much, Ryan. This isn't concluded. In fact, I articulated softly. I believe it is. You obtained precisely what you solicited. An eve in my cabin. I trust the ordeal proved instructive, the words a final twist. The link terminated. I reclined in my upholstered seat, positioning the device delicately on my workstation beside the yet radiant screens depicting the vacant cabin. 9 years of real estate expertise had instructed me that the most graceful resolutions were frequently the plainest. Ryan had sought to appropriate my domain via mental coercion and sentimental extortion. I'd merely reciprocated, utilizing superior tech and tactical forbearance, the exchange equitable in its irony. The device commenced chiming anew nearly forthwith. Ryan's identifier on the display. I deactivated it. Wednesday morning delivered affirmation of my tactical foresights. Via the cabin's lens array, I observed Nora's leased van enter the lane at 9:30, precisely burdened with locksmith gear, an assured mien that wouldn't endure. From my den in Portland, I beheld her near the portal with expert implements, evidently convinced that altering several latches would remedy their cabin dilemma. The locksmith Nora had enlisted appeared dubious even prior to scrutinizing Alex's fused safeguard array. Within 45 minutes, both women stood rubbing their craniums in evident perplexity. "These aren't standard latches, ma'am," the locksmith's timbre transmitted crisply via the sonic capture. They're fused intelligent domicile arrays, biometric readers, cordless linkage, reserve energy provisions. Nora's visage shadowed as she examined the complex apparatus. "Can't you merely substitute them regardless?"
not sans recoding the whole safeguard web. The locksmith stowed her implements with the proficiency of one keen to depart. That's far exceeding my purview. You'd require a tech expert versed in domicile mechanization arrays. And Alex Thompson was the sole such expert within 250 miles, possessing intimate familiarity with this specific setup. I noted mentally to express gratitude anew for his meticulous labor. Nora lingered solitary in my cabin's vestibule. Post the locksmith's exit, her posture drooping with the burden of tech vanquish. Via the lens, I beheld her boot futilely at the portal casing ere retreating to her van for the protracted return to Portland. The remainder of my Wednesday elapsed in agreeable expectancy, the hours ticking with satisfying slowness. Ryan would absorb Nora's setback account circa 3 sroud. By dusk, despondency would propel them to my threshold for an ultimate clash. 35 years of directing development ventures had schooled me to identify when adversaries comprehended their outflanking. 7:30 elicited the clamor of vehicle portals slamming in my lane. Via the pane, I noted Ryan and Nora nearing my portal with the belligerent carriage of folks who'd depleted logical alternatives, their steps heavy with frustration. Ryan's initial rap shook the portal casing. Unlock. We require dialogue. I unlatched the portal, composedly observing Ryan's reddened visage and Nora's bald hands. Fine evening. How proceeded your day? Spare the guileless facade. Ryan shoved beyond me into my vestibule. Nora couldn't alter the latches since you've converted the cabin into some sort of advanced bastion. Intelligent domicile safeguards are gaining traction, I remarked mildly. Highly efficacious against illicit entry, a modern necessity. Nora advanced nearer, attempting to leverage her stature for menace. Either cease this absurd ploy and surrender the cabin, or consider yourself San's son. Is that intended as menace or vow? Ryan's gaze blazed with wrath. We'll unearth a means to substantiate your culpability judicially. We'll litigate for torment, for psychic anguish for all. Grounded on what proof? An authority dossier that detected no unlawful conduct. You comprehend what you executed. Ryan's timbre fractured with exasperation. Somehow you masterminded that entire horror and will substantiate it. I reclined against my portal casing, wholly at ease, the control shift palpable. Substantiate that you underwent what authorities deemed a tech glitch. Fortune favor you. Nora essayed an alternate tactic. Regard George, be sensible. You're aging and solitary. What utility does such a vast cabin hold for you? The precise phrases Ryan had deployed amid our telephonic clash. They truly lacked fresh content, their repertoire exhausted. Compelling viewpoint from folks who endeavored to filch my domain sans consent. Ryan's restraint ultimately shattered wholly. Very well. You desire rigorous play. You'll never encounter any descendants. When we procreate, they'll never acknowledge a grandsire existed. You'll perish isolated and obscured akin to mom. The viciousness of evoking Catherine's recollection ought to have lacerated me. 4 years prior, it would have propelled me into Lacrymo's regrets and frantic negotiation. Now it merely affirmed what I'd already deduced regarding my son's essence. The identical manner you neglected to solicit consent ere bestowing my cabin. This isn't terminated. Ryan's timbre ascended to a screech. We'll annihilate you. We'll tarnish your standing, alienate all from you. By our conclusion, you'll regret not simply yielding the cabin. Nora nodded vigorously. He's accurate. We possess allies' networks. We'll render your existence wretched. I examined their countenances with analytical aloofness. Ryan, the progeny I'd nurtured and forfeited, for now vowing to demolish me, for declining to yield my life's toil. Nora, the daughter-in-law, I'd embraced into the fold, menacing societal combat, since her parents couldn't appropriate my abode. Have you concluded quite? Ryan advanced nearer, his visage contorted with spite. We're merely commencing. You lack conception of our capabilities. In truth, I possessed a crystal conception. Their capabilities spanned mental coercion, larceny efforts, and savage individual assaults, yet they'd already unleashed every armament in their repository, and I persisted upright, unbowed.
More crucially, they'd just furnished all the rationale I required for the ultimate resolution I'd contemplated since yesterday's telephonic exchange, their words the final nail. Well, I articulated softly, I presume we'll witness who's more adept. Something in my inflection prompted Nora to retreat a pace. Ryan faltered, perchance discerning that his menaces had accomplished something unintended, a shift in the air. "We're departing," he proclaimed, striving to reclaim mastery of the circumstance. "But this discourse isn't terminated." "In fact," I retorted, observing their withdrawal toward their vehicle, "I believe it is." I sealed the portal and proceeded back to my den, where Catherine's portrait awaited on my workstation, her smile a beacon of quiet strength. Tomorrow I'd initiate some calls. Samuel Wong first, then several additional vocational contacts. Ryan fancied he grasped conflict. He was poised to learn the disparity betwixt maneuvers and stratagem, the lesson profound. Thursday morning ushered the instant I'd been maneuvering since Ryan's initial call. At 9:30, I positioned in Thomas Grant's meeting chamber, beholding my son and his cohorts enter via the portal with the belligerent surety of folks convinced they clutched victorious assets. Thomas, my certifier for 18 years, had readied all per my Wednesday Eve directives. Juridical papers sprawled across the varnished board like proof in a hearing, which in numerous respects this constituted. Ryan claimed the seat directly opposing me, his mandible rigid with resolve. "All right, Dad, we're present to settle this cabin affair conclusively." Nora situated beside him, limbs folded in what she likely deemed a daunting stance. Edward and Patricia Wilkins settled into seats along the partition, their means blending optimism with residual shock from Sunday's tech ordeal. "I value everyone's attendance," I articulated calmly. "Thomas possesses vital data to impart." Ryan's gaze constricted. "Omit the decorum. We demand the cabin conveyed to Nora's parents forthwith. No further ploys, no further postponements." In truth, I responded, "I'm apprehensive that's unfeasible." Nora inclined a head belligerently. "Naught's unfeasible if you merely endorse the documents. We've exhibited patience sufficiently." "You misconstrue." I motioned to Thomas, who cleared his pharynx with expert exactitude. "I no longer possess the cabin." The hush extended for 15 seconds. Ryan's visage commenced altering, hue veins pulsing. "What precisely does that signify?" Nora insisted. Thomas unveiled the uppermost dossier on his station. Mr. Reynolds conveyed proprietorship of the Lake Michigan asset to the New Horizons Charity for Indigent Aid. The conveyance concluded Tuesday morning and is wholly juridical. Ryan's timbre fractured like shattering crystal. "That's unfeasible. You lacked entitlement." "I possessed every entitlement to convey asset I held," I articulated softly. "All is juridically archived and irreversible." Nora's assured carriage crumbled. "But we possessed a pact. Ryan claimed the cabin was ours." Thomas's vocational inflection never fluctuated. "Mr. Reynolds can solely convey asset he truly holds. The charity holds the cabin now." Ryan surged to his feet, his seat grating against the flooring. "You can't inflict this upon us. We require that cabin." "You endeavored to filch it," I noted. This appeared a more fitting resolution. Patricia Wilkins' timbre quavered with bewilderment. "What does this imply for us? Where shall we reside?" "You'll must devise alternate provisions," I articulated. "Precisely as you anticipated me to when you sought to expel me from my own domain." Ryan's palms quivered as he clutched the board's rim. "This is merely vindictiveness. Sheer reprisal. This is equity." I met his gaze steadfastly. "And it's enduring." Nora's visage had blanched as the monetary ramifications struck. "Our schemes are tomorrow. We relied on that cabin to remedy our issues. Perhaps you ought to have solicited consent ere forging those schemes." Thomas dispersed supplementary papers across the board. "The benevolent conveyance incorporates a perpetual utilization provision for Mr. Reynolds as benefactor. He preserves complete access to the asset until his demise." "Then naught alters for you." Ryan's timbre ascended toward frenzy. "You yet get to utilize it. All alters," I rectified. "You no longer possess any assertion to it eternally." Edward Wilkins articulated initially, his timbre diminutive and perplexed. "So we acquire naught after all." After endeavoring to filch my domain via mental coercion and menaces, that's accurate. Ryan subsided back into his seat, the combat ebbing from his visage as the actuality embedded. When did you execute this Tuesday morning promptly post your tech ordeal? The chronology struck him like a corporeal strike. Tuesday post the cabin episode, but pre their clash at my abode. Every menace, every ultimatum, every venomous syllable had been futile from the instant uttered. Nora's timbre was scarcely a murmur. You were perpetually scheming this. I was perpetually scheming to safeguard my domain from folks who deemed they could appropriate it via coercion and bullying. Ryan gazed at the juridical papers as if they might evaporate under his scrutiny. The charity ploy. That's merely a ruse, correct? Some method to retain mastery. Thomas responded ere I could. The New Horizons. Charity is a bona fide benevolent entity. The conveyance is authentic and irrevocable. So you triumph, Nora articulated bitterly. Is that what you desired to hear? I desired to hear naught from any of you, but since you compelled this strife, yes, I triumph. Ryan's poise ultimately splintered wholly. You've ravaged our tomorrow. Nora's parents possess nowhere to proceed. They can proceed anywhere save my cabin. Patricia Wilkins commenced weeping softly, her sobs a quiet underscore to the defeat. Edward patted her arm with the futile motions of a man who'd never grasped how they'd reached this juncture, his confusion etched deep. Ryan rose on wobbly limbs, his assured belligerence supplanted by vacant rout. Proceed not remains to debate. As they proceeded toward the portal, I voiced one ultimate remark. Ryan, he pivoted back his visage a veneer of weariness and fury. Next occasion you attempt to coerce someone. Recall that vocational expertise trumps sentimental extortion. Invariably. The portal sealed aft them with a gentle snap. Thomas and I lingered in agreeable hush, encircled by the juridical papers that had just concluded a conflict I'd never sought to wage, the resolution a quiet victory. Expertly orchestrated, George Thomas articulated ultimately. 35 years of development packs schooled me to perpetually possess an egress tactic. I amassed my duplicates of the papers and proceeded toward the portal. Time to journey to Lake Michigan and savor my cabin in utter serenity. Friday morning delivered the initial dawn in 4 years that I could observe Sans dread wrath or protective computation the light soft and promising. I voyaged to Lake Michigan amid Oregon's verdant spring vista, sensing something I'd nearly obliterated from memory. Unadorned fulfillment, the road winding like a path to redemption. The cabin greeted me with the quietude of a domicile that belonged anew wholly to its legitimate dweller, the air fresh with reclaimed peace. I engaged my latchkey, sans glancing rearward. Ingress sans hearkening for antagonistic timbres, traversed chambers, harboring echoes of recent tech combat, yet sensing somehow purified the space reborn. My primary duty was refurbishment. Alex's lenses dismounted readily, their complex fixtures surrendering to fundamental implements and resolute intent. Movement trackers, vocal aids cast arrays. Each element of our intricate reprisal stage was meticulously crated into cartons for restitution to my aidful neighbor. Within 3 hours, the cabin had reverted to its innate condition. No flickering indicators, no concealed mics, no tech safeguards surveilling unseen approaches. Just a dwelling by a lake possessed by a benevolent charity, inhabited by a man who no longer required to shield himself from his own kin, the simplicity liberating. I prepared coffee, utilizing the identical apparatus that had beheld Sunday's turmoil, the brew's aroma mingling with lake breezes, then transported my vessel to the deck where Catherine and I had partaken innumerable tranquil morns, the wood warm underfoot. The lake expanded afore me, its plain mirroring the midday sun in motifs that appeared to frolic with promise rather than menace the view, a balm to old wounds. For the initial occasion since my spouse's demise, I sat utterly motionless, the stillness profound. The metamorphosis sensed nearly ethereal in its totality. 4 years prior, I'd been a shattered widower who conflated affection with capitulation, benevolence with frailty, familial devotion with enduring mistreatment. The individual who'd erected a real estate realm from void had somehow overlooked safeguarding his own limits, the oversight, a gradual erosion. Catherine's timbre murmured through reminiscence, but sharper now, unstrained by sorrow and coercion. Exercise patience with Ryan, she'd advised. He's processing his bereavement. But Catherine had never intended patience to become eternal victimhood. She'd never proposed that affection necessitated enduring larceny, coercion, and mental torment. The lady who'd wed a resolute entrepreneur wouldn't have desired him to devolve into a pushover even for their son, her legacy demanding better. Benevolent sans self-esteem isn't benevolence, I vocalized to the vacant deck. It's merely frailty masquerading as merit, the words a personal mantra. The encircling ridges appeared to affirm concurrence, their stoic peaks, a reminder of enduring strength. Nature itself exemplified limits. Liquid abode within its banks. Ridges upheld their bases. Cycles shifted per their innate cadences, irrespective of mortal pleas, the lesson timeless. Ryan had expended 4 years probing my limits, ascertaining they could be displaced, eroded, disregarded wholly. Each triumphant coercion had instructed him that affection signified submission, that blood bonds assured boundless entry to all I'd amassed or merited. I'd imparted that tutorial via my own conduct, every draft I'd issued, every plea I'd exceeded, every instance I'd opted for fleeting harmony over enduring esteem, the cycle now broken. The tech reprisal had been gratifying yet ultimately superfluous, a spectacle amid necessity. The authentic conquest was plainer and more enduring. Mastering refusal. Mastering that self-preservation wasn't brutality, but vitality. Mastering that certain bonds cannot endure the advent of authentic limits, the insight hard won. My device had stayed mute for 36 hours. No frantic outreaches from Ryan. No intimidations from Nora. No frantic bids to unearth gaps in the benevolent conveyance. They'd ultimately comprehended what I'd unearthed in Thomas's chamber. The conflict concluded, and they'd forfeited utterly the silence golden. But more vital than their rout was my restoration. The mourning widower who'd aired exploitation for affection had vanished. In his stead sat a man who recollected his own merit, who grasped that authentic benevolence demanded fortitude, not frailty, the rebirth complete. Catherine would have beamed with pride, not at the reprisal perchance, but at the self-esteem of the man who'd rediscovered that self-protection was an expression of affection. Affection for her echo, affection for his own honor, affection for the prospect that bonds founded on reciprocal esteem might yet manifest somewhere in his horizon, the future open. The midday sun caressed my countenance as I concluded my coffee and pondered the peculiar arithmetic of kin. Ryan had computed that sentimental coercion plus monetary strain would yield perpetual entry to my holdings. He'd never factored that anguish plus interval plus tactical cognition might yield a parent who ultimately mastered self-shielding, the equation balanced. Lake Michigan's timeless serenity mirrored a verity I was ultimately prepared to embrace. Certain clashes conclude not with accord, but with the comprehension that serenity demands separation. Certain affection manifests via limits rather than yield. For the initial occasion in 4 years, I sensed wholly myself anew. If this narrative resonated with you, kindly thumbs up this footage and roll in the channel, and convey your thoughts on this tale in the remarks. To hearken the subsequent narrative, tap the pane on the left. Gratitude for viewing.